Welcome back to continue the conversation. I'm your host, Tega Ororo. We often think of American politics as something that's contained within the United States border. But the reality is political rhetoric travels through social media, through television, through algorithms, through culture. And in the Trump era, we saw specific kinds of rhetoric, polarizing, combative, deeply emotional, not just reshape American politics, but influence conversations globally. Today, I'm joined by Australian media personality Abbie Chatfield to talk about how the shift has shown up in Australia. We unpack how the US style culture wars and political messaging has seeped into Australian discourse and what that means for the media, the audience, and the public debates. We also are going to talk about what it's like to be a personality who speaks openly about politics and the backlash that follows. From online attacks to public sentiment, Abbie shares what it means to navigate visibility in the age of outrage. This episode is about media power, global influence, and what happens when pop culture and politics collide. Let's get into it and let's check out my episode with Abbie Chatfield. Hi, everyone. Welcome, Abbie Chatfield.
Hello. I'm so excited to see you in motion, but not on my phone. I'm excited to see you in motion on my screen because I have a parasocial relationship with you. And we message back and I go, sending you love. When things go, I'll go, thinking
We're
of
fighting
you.
for our lives.
Yeah. I'll go, when the election, I'm going, hey, thinking of you, hope you're okay. And you're going, hey, help us. It's awful. So I'm so glad to have a conversation with you.
I am glad too. For people who don't know this, Abbie is currently living, residing, doing this podcast from Australia, and I'm here in America. So this is the first time I'm doing a cross-continent podcast episode. So that's really exciting. With that being said, I want people to know, Abbie, before we get into the discussion, because I feel like people act like American politics does not really affect other places outside of America. So, for people outside of Australia, especially me, how would you describe your career and what you do, Abbie? That's my first question to you.
Okay, so my career, it's going to sound really wanky. It's going to sound really and then I did this, and then I did this. But that's not the point of it. I guess just to have context for this conversation. I'm a TV, I've hosted F-Boy Island in Australia. You have that in America as well. I'm a TV host. Yeah, I've been on the Masked Singer panel, so I'm a TV personality. But I also am very into politics. I have a podcast called It's a Lot, and we talk about everything from, I interviewed the Prime Minister last year to kick off his election campaigns. That was a huge deal. I was like, why the hell are you in my podcast studio? But lovely to meet you, Prime Minister. And all the way through to, oversharing. We call them nightmare fuels, where people, bringing their worst stories. I don't know how prim and proper is this podcast.
You can cuss, girl. You can cuss, girl. That's fine.
Cool. There was a girl last week that called in, and she'd actually been paralyzed because of a giant cock, and she was calling us from the hospital bed, going, guys, it's been 72 hours. I'm still paralyzed. The gynecologist said I snapped my pelvic floor and it's caused, babe. So
How is that even possible?
Yeah, babe, I don't know. And we called me up. We're like, how big is this thing? And she said, I think she said 3 Coke cans. No, she said a Subway footlong. And I said, okay, so a footlong. So it's 12 inches.
That's a lot. Okay, that's kind of a lot. Here's my opinion. I know, we break it, but it's not the other way around.
No.
How?
Well, it was bad. But so long story short, the podcast is very broad. I also do reality TV things, but so I'm not a political correspondent. I guess I am your Australian correspondent right now, but I'm not a political expert, but I'm very interested in politics. And I talk a lot about Trump on my podcast. During the election, I was watching every rally in full, 3 hours every day, because I was so scared, and I would recap to my Australian listeners. So, I do a lot of politics, TV, lots of different stuff. I do comedy as well, stand up. But for today's purposes, the context is I'm a bit of a like mainstream person that talks about politics and then gets destroyed in the media for it. So that's the summary.
Hey, that's a normal occurrence for anyone who lives in America, but I think it's amplified worse when you're in like foreign countries because they expect you like not to care about foreign things that are happening. And this brings in a weird point that in America, a lot of people don't really understand the war in Iran is like happening in Iran. Like the media in Al Jazeera, BBC is completely different than what we're hearing here in like Fox News or ABC or CBS. Because again, this is what happens when a government like really controls the media. The only people who's like actually giving independent media right now is Al Jazeera
Yeah.
and those other like international organizations compared to here. And then independent media is doing the job to like pushing that out, but it's harder and harder. But I'm glad we can have this conversation just from your perspective, what it's like living on the ground while dealing with that. But my next question to you is from your perspective, how did Trump era politics in the US start showing up in Australian discourse? I've always kind of wondered that in like a lot of different ways. Like, how did it start like popping up? Because you know, like when people talk about red pill content, it's like one person. But I feel like in this Trump era, like it's a little bit different. It skews a little bit differently. So, like, how did it start showing up from what you experienced in Australia discourse?
Well, I guess when Trump was elected in 2016, I feel like I knew no one that was happy about it. It was either people going, it doesn't matter, it's in America, or how horrible, sobbing in the streets. People were crying at work when that happened. So back then, we even had an idea of I mean, we had no idea, I guess, how bad it could get in hindsight. That is such a naive time. Thinking about 2016, you go, this stupid man's in charge. That's going to be bad for Americans. And then, you know, there wasn't really understanding. But I think social media and TikTok, I know it's kind of cliche to say, but it really has brought us a whole lot closer. I mean, even you and I having this podcast, you
Yeah.
know, like the common interest of American politics has brought me to have this conversation with you. So in the past few years, that's been getting closer and closer, and that it's honestly had a similar trajectory to, I guess, what you've seen in America. You mentioned before the red pill pipeline. We are seeing that mirrored play for play in Australia.
Yeah.
But we always say Australia is a year or two behind the US with trends, with media, with cultural shifts. But I feel like that 1 or 2 years is now turning into more 2 or 3 months. So there's been an influx of red pill content, an influx of misinformation, and even a mirroring of the talking points of anti-immigration sentiment. Australia's always been quite a xenophobic country. You know, we when I grew up, like really badly, because we are an island nation. So
Yeah.
there's this thing of like, stop the boats, don't let anyone in, which is so disgusting. And a previous prime minister even had a statue on his desk that said, "I stopped these," and it was a statue of a boat. So yeah, really
Okay.
awful xenophobic rhetoric. When I was growing up, people would have stickers on their cars that says, I grew up in Queensland, which is kind of like Texas. So like it's kind of like rural, a bit more backwards, but also there are pockets of really progressive areas.
Okay.
So where I grew up, there were even people that had stickers on the back of their cars that would say, "Fuck off, we're full." That is an anti-immigration rhetoric. So that's always been there. But I noticed seeing people wearing MAGA hats. Babe, Australians wearing MAGA hats. I saw a truck once, maybe mid 2024 was when it kind of was like, the culture wars being put upon American society is seeping into Australian society now because of social media, because of TikTok, and also because of the monetization that is possible from being one of these figureheads.
Yep.
So, like, even being in media myself, sorry, this is a really long-winded answer, but
No.
I
We
have
love this answer. We love this answer.
I have there's so many elements to it, but even being in media myself, I notice that every time anyone wants to do something, whether it's a TV show, a podcast, start a network, whatever, they go, what are the Americans doing? Right? So, and that's great when it comes to normal things like silly dating shows or, you know, or documentaries. That's great. But it's not so great when we're looking at a culture in the US that seems to be, well, spearheading towards authoritarian, right-wing, xenophobic, racist, transphobic, just bigoted society because of who was attempting to lead it, who is now leading it, Trump. When we see that, then people who have failing media careers,
Yeah.
have no, in my opinion, this is my personal opinion, have no talent, who have been on reality shows, who can't get a platform from, just being an influencer. We see a trend of them seeing people in the US that are, very successful and loaded, like so much money. So they just copy that. So that was kind of one of the things that I noticed. Even like I said, mid 2024, even maybe Christmas 2023. I remember seeing I was in my hometown in Queensland, and there was someone in a ute, like in a truck that had Trump decals all over their truck. So this has been, which is bizarre. And I go, what, mate? Like, it does have things to do with us, but why are you excited about it? So we've seen that happening, and we're also seeing it recently after our previous election. So our election was 6 months after your election.
Yes, I remember that.
Mate, it was a crazy year, and then Canada as well. So what a crazy, crazy year. And when Trump got in, the Liberal Party, who is actually our right-wing party, the Liberal Party, which is confusing for Americans, and they are also blue, so it's all backwards, down under. But so the Liberal Party started doing the Trump playbook. There were members of the party that were saying, "Make Australia great again." They were using the exact Trump playbook, these culture wars. And we even saw people leave their mainstream media jobs to start podcasts that really mirror things like Tucker Carlson and things like that. So long-winded answer, but it's been a slow seeping in. But I think that the panic about Trump being president was not even really there. It was there in left-wing spaces and in spaces in progressive media, but I think it's only really hit a lot of Australians in the past couple of months. But even when Roe v. Wade was overturned, actually, we were losing our minds about that, because we also now are having a lot of anti-abortion sentiment in Australia, where we always had the best abortion laws.
So I'll give you some tea on that, which is like interesting. Oh, so let's backtrack a little bit and we'll break your answer down. And I'll give you some answers that will help from an American perspective. Funny enough, I'm not American. I was born in Nigeria, raised in the UK, and I would just live here.
But you have the American accent, not a UK accent.
Girl, that's why I switch between the accents most of the time in the video. See, exactly. So people don't really know. I'm incognito. But so my first election was 2016. My first election was the Trump-Hillary election. And when I went in, I think I went in blind. I went in thinking like, oh, everyone loved Hillary, like Hillary's gonna win. And then she lost. And then a fire was lit under my butt, right? Because I sat there and I was like, we let a reality star win the election. Like, what is the reason for that? And like, my theory actually goes a little bit deeper into it. And I don't want to blame Obama, but I think Obama is the reason Donald Trump won. And like, hear me out, because it's actually like a little bit deeper, right? As a Black person, I think Trump emboldens a type of racism that lives so deeply in American society that when they saw a Black man, those normal people who wouldn't vote, when they saw a Black man go to the highest land in office and was like, oh, he could get there and he could do really well. And I'm going to blame the Republicans, because honestly, if Republicans actually cared about people, they would have spent less time fighting Obama and actually doing a lot of stuff better with Obama. Like, we could have actually had a pretty good society, but they spent more time being racist and bigoted during Obama's administration and trying to make this Black man look like he's incompetent or whatever, which I'm like, most of y'all are incompetent now. We have Marjorie Taylor Greene. We'll get into that later.
Oh my God.
But pretty much that kind of left a taste in like the racist America underbelly. So they just kind of rose from the ashes and they were like, no, we can't have it happen again. We can't have a woman. We already had a Black person. We can't have a woman. So Donald Trump won. And for me, it was like really sad. I think for me, I cried a little bit. Like, with the shock of it, I cried a little bit. The first administration, I was still in college, right? And I was getting into my political career, getting into my little groove. And it was very different. And here is the crazy thing that happened. I no longer talk to this man. A man who I considered my best friend the day after the election. It's like me and my friend Miranda. I remember this. I was in our college cafeteria and we were talking, blah, 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 about the election, how much, it really affected us. And he comes and sits down and we're like, oh, we're just talking about the election. Really disappointed. He's like, no, I'm happy. I was like, what do you mean? It's like, I voted for Trump. And I looked at him and I was like, are you okay? And like the backstory,
Yeah.
I'm not going to expose someone's life tea because it's a little bit different, but I'm saying a person like you should really not be voting for Trump, right? If
Mhm.
your economic circumstance is going to be worse under Trump, why would you vote for him? That brings into another point. Now let's skip a little bit. It is now the Biden Trump election. I'm not kidding you. I think I made multiple videos during that time frame because it was like about 3 days before we got the full results. I think it was like Nevada was like one of the big holdouts, right? Also, my
Mhm.
state was kind of one of the big holdouts because we have a place called Detroit. So the best way to put it is like the size of Sydney is the city of New York, right? Like that
Yeah.
is like the land capacity. So it's hard to like really count these ballots, right? I live in a state where at the time they passed laws like you can get an absentee ballot without what's it called? Without requesting it. In the past you would have to fill out paperwork and say like why you needed a ballot to be sent to your home.
Yeah.
Either that or you go in person. But then they passed it and they're like, no, everyone should be able to. Which kind of worked out for people who worked like me. Like I work on election day and I don't have time to be like I'm in one side of the state and I have to drive back or wake up super early because polls open at like 7 a.m. in some places.
Mm.
So I have to drive back, do this, and then drive back to my candidate. So I was able to do
Yeah.
that. And I remember we were waiting for like 3 days. And my city, and at the time, I lived in Metro Detroit. So Metro Detroit is Detroit's one of the biggest cities in Michigan and in the country. But Metro Detroit is like encompassing like 20 cities around the city of Detroit, but also
Mhm.
there's like mini townships, right, in the city of Detroit. So now all of those mini townships in Detroit have to send their ballot to one place. They call this place Hutchinson Center, right? There was over like 2,000 volunteers in armed security. It was bad. I remember going there after work and I like went live and I was like showing what's going on because MAGA protesters were trying to break in and apparently watch what's happening with the ballots, right? I think I have this video to this day and that was like baby creator me, right? And I was like,
Yeah.
I am not a political activist. Like, I'm out here, and I was doing like real life journalism at that point, right? I was literally there like filming. I've seen like organizations like CNN and all these people like waiting out there. I was watching MAGA protesters trying to get in. Like police from everywhere was coming in, blah, blah, blah. I had to stay like a little bit of distance away. It was horrible, right? And I watched it. I ended up like getting to a point where I was like, I'm gonna leave. So I did. I ended up leaving. I was there for about 2 hours and it went on for hours. I got there maybe like 30 minutes into that whole situation. And so that's happening. We then find out a couple of days later that, Biden wins and I'm celebrating. I actually go out into the streets in my Detroit neighborhood because I was in college then and people were celebrating. People like we did not like people understood how bad it was under Trump that we were like, all this stuff. And then the election stealing happened, right? They start talking about, oh, the election was stolen, the election was stolen, the election was stolen, which Trump has now created a very nasty distrust of the American voting system for like a good population that's intelligent and does their research and thinks about it. No, the election wasn't stolen. There's a
Yeah.
population who think the election is stolen. I've actually met an election denier and I looked at them. I was like, "What's your proof?" He's like, "Well, the ballots and this." And I was like, "No, no, that's not even true. Like, what ballots? What place?" And I looked it up on my phone. There was no information about it. He's like, "Well, I
Mm.
saw because a friend worked a poll." I was like, "Well, one thing to know is poll workers also kind of sign almost like an NDA basically. Like they can't disclose like how things went down in a polling place. So if a
Mm.
polling worker is telling you that is kind of a crime. They can get arrested and go to jail.
Yeah.
Right. So
It's
whoever's
kind of a
telling
crime.
you this, is crazy. And so in summary of all of that, the rhetoric like was a lot worse after I think from what you experienced, like it was worse when he started. It was a lot worse after he lost for us, right? Because we sat through this like storm, a barrage of hate. Like this man will disappear and then pop up again, disappear and pop up
Mm.
again. And so when he came back, we didn't think like, he would like win. And then the whole Biden dropping out and then Kamala Harris came back in, which I stand by the point of if Biden would have dropped out a year ago, I think Kamala Harris would have had a better chance. But it also proves the point that America does not like women. America has never liked
No.
women. America will still not like women. I do want a woman in office, but it will be under my generation when I'm an adult and have kids, like kids in like their teens, when America will finally realize like their mistake in a sense of, I heard this the other day on TikTok and someone went, you didn't vote for Hillary Clinton because you called her abrasive. You didn't vote for Kamala Harris. You called her abrasive. It's just your internalized misogyny is the reason
Mhm.
you didn't vote for Kamala Harris. And then there are people using, oh, the genocide in Gaza as an excuse. And I was like, I want to stand by the statement. Single issue voters are the hardest people to break through with. As someone who knocks on doors, who did campaigns, those people, when like specific people be like, this is my single issue, this is the issue. I'm like, I ask the question now, it's like, is your life better under Donald Trump, to a lot of people who voted for him, right? And that's the question I think you can ask your audience. It's like, is your life better under Donald Trump? You can ask Australians, like, is your life, is his influence in your country better now than it was later? Because honestly, it's not. It's not.
It's
Donald
not.
Trump has been raising mayhem over so many things, but that's a different topic for another day. But I wanted to give you that background so you could fully
Yeah.
understand a bit more. It's so much more. I don't want to say it's so much more complicated, but I think seeing your experience on a digital scale of what you're experiencing with Donald Trump from your country versus our country, it's like this is a lived experience. I'm living here while he's here, and you're getting like the residual effects from it, right? Because even now we're basically in a war.
Yeah.
And so my next question to you is like, how does American culture really translate into Australian politics? Are they adopted directly or adapted, basically?
I would say they are, like I was saying, with the Liberal Party, again, who is our right wing party, they were a more conservative party, I guess. We have another party that is more right wing that's called One Nation. So, because we have multiple, our electoral system is different to America. I might just quickly explain for American listeners.
Go for it. Go.
And even for you, because how are you to know how our system works? But so we have a preferential voting system. So we don't have a singular. We don't have this person, this person. Our system is you vote for your representative in your area, and you can do that through preferences. So, for example, in my area, I put the Greens first, the Independents second, and then I put Labor, who ended up winning, who is my preferred two-party. And then bottom, I put the Liberals. So because of that system, we are able to have a much more diverse parliament. So that means that we will have parties that could have, 8 seats in the House of Representatives, and that's still a decent amount that can really sway votes. So it really encourages people in working together and forming coalitions and creating teams, essentially, or having to persuade our Greens, which is our most left-wing party, who are all about taxing the rich, and they're fucking incredible. I was campaigning with them. So because of that, it has been both adapted and adopted. I would say our more right-wing parties, such as One Nation, who's led by a woman called Pauline Hanson, who just last week said that there are no good Muslims, and who called an Aboriginal senator a bitch in Parliament yesterday. She wore a burqa into Parliament 2 times to make a statement against Muslim people. She is.
So they just outwardly racist over there. They're like they're in your face racist.
And it's all about Muslims right now. This is the big thing right now, is about Muslim people, and it's just fucking disgusting. So she and her party are more so adopting that Trump thing. She released a cartoon movie called A Super Progressive Movie, and it's a parody about left-wing politics, and it's about a story about a white man being a victim, being the worst victim, and he's being murdered and put the death penalty for being. It's just, they're doing this propaganda and also this memification that I feel like the White House is doing, that I've noticed, because I still follow the White House on Instagram, and it's like this memification of politics that allows the least engaged, the most angry, and the people with the most time on their hands to feel seen, recognized, and important from this One Nation party, which I think is quite similar to what Trump does. It's like college age people who are maybe undereducated, who just want to be like, yeah, fuck, this is funny, or fuck this, or this is, yeah, I'm angry at my life, so at least it's comic relief. Oh, she gets it. She's one of us, Is that happening? Simultaneously, we have the Liberal Party, which is our more like moderate right wing, but they're quite conservative. They have noticeably been leaning more towards the right, and people do think that's because of the US election and seeing the power also in Pauline Hanson's rhetoric, the no good Muslims rhetoric. They're seeing that they are now cuddling up to One Nation a bit, because, and this is a bit a boring Australian politics, but there used to be a coalition where two parties joined together because they weren't strong enough to form a party that could win an election. So
Yeah.
they have now disbanded recently over, we had some hate speech laws that came through, and they are they're ineffective, completely biased, and really bad. So that split them up. So now what's happening right now is the Liberal Party are trying to find more teammates, essentially. And the teammates that are on offer are more right wing. So in doing that, they've gotten rid of their female leader a couple of weeks ago. Now we have a man in charge. Yep. And everyone called this when Susan Lee was instated. She has been removed as the leader. Now they have a man, and now it seems as though their politics are getting more right wing. We even have premiers in certain states, which I guess is like your governors. We have
Basically.
Yeah, like the leader of the state, I guess, that we're in. So we have people that are pushing for anti-abortion legislation when that's only recently been decriminalised in Queensland, where I'm from. At the same time, Pauline Hanson is saying that babies are getting aborted after birth, which is just murder, and that's just a lie. So there's just misinformation, I guess. And I think what's happened is these parties have seen what the US got away with, and I think they saw what was able to be spread quickly, and that the whole any publicity is good publicity thing, they're getting more and more extreme because they saw that it worked with Trump, and they see that it works with other right-wing commentators as well if they aren't in politics, and they really lean into that. Simultaneously, we have the Labor Party who are in power right now. They're our centre-left party, but they are increasingly becoming more right-wing. We recently had protests be banned for a certain period of time, which
wait, isn't it like a constitutional right to protest?
Yes, we have a right to protest.
Okay.
The justification for this was there was a terrorist attack in Bondi where I live.
Heard about that. Yep.
Yeah, and that was then used. A tragedy in Bondi was then used as a culture war. 15 Jewish people were. Well, they weren't all Jewish, but it was a Jewish event for Hanukkah.
Yeah.
And there were two people who were Islamic State supporters who came and had a mass shooting. It's our first mass shooting since 1996. So that was really impactful. So then that was then used by certain parties. That tragedy was completely taken by certain parties to win culture war points, I guess. And they said that it was the pro-Palestine movement, essentially, that was encouraging this, when these people weren't Palestinian and they weren't doing it for Palestine. They were just Muslim. So you see, that has then led our Labor government to be a little bit more right-wing again. So we're seeing, I guess, a similar shift that I think that I've seen in the US, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think even the Democrats it's going a little bit more, they're pandering a little bit more to this base that they're seeing that are louder, but I don't think they're stronger, in Australia anyway.
So the one thing, just to add to that, and also I feel like we're going to need a part 2 of this conversation.
Sorry,
No, in a good way. I'm like, this could like be a series. We'll be back. We might create a new podcast from this. But what they're not seeing is that the result of Trump's rhetoric is putting more Democrats in power. Crazy enough, okay? So we have something called the midterms, and that's where the House and Senate kind of shifts a little bit. So the legislative is Congress, the executive is the president, and then judicial is the Supreme Court. So how we basically are putting this conversation is that Congress has like a little bit of shakeup. Congress is 2 parts. There's a House and the Senate, right? The House has more members than the Senate, and the Senate represents more people than the House, right? And then those areas also go into states, right? So your executive, legislative, and judicial also are on a state level. So like, look at it, it's like there's a federal level and a state level. It's the same exact structure on a state level. We have state House members, state Senate members, we have our own state Supreme Courts, and then we have our governor, who's basically the executive of the branch, right? And so what we're noticing is since Trump got elected and all the like crazy crap that this man has been doing, it's been causing a lot of like opposite effect, right? Like he thinks it's gonna like help more Republicans when it's not. What we've seen is like an influx of Democrats like consistently winning in races and outnumbering the Republicans. A good example is like today right now we're having an election, a really big election in Texas. It's against like James Tallarico and Jasmine Crockett.
Jasmine Crockett?
Yes.
Okay. That's happening today.
It's happening today. So we had like early
Okay.
voting, but today's like election day. So again, it goes back to the early voting thing. It's like 2 weeks where you can go in and vote early and then the actual election day. So in like a couple hours, my time, we'll know the results. We know the results based on early polling numbers, right? It's when people come out and they're like, based on what we know, like, who did you vote for? And also at certain polling locations, when they read out, when the polls close, they like close the machines and it will tally votes, right? Like it will automatically tally votes and it'll tell you the number. They still have to go through and manually check it, but we'll start knowing those numbers, I think as early as like 8:30, 9 o'clock. And also Texas is on like central time. So like they're closing at like 8 my time. So we'll know closer to like 9:30, 10 who won. And that's a whole conversation. Otherwise, either way, basically like how that's playing around is that the more Trump is doing whatever he's doing, the more Democrats are winning. So a good example is we now have two Democratic women in some states that are killing it. Okay. So one year I moved to Virginia and I worked in Virginia for the Senate there. And they've just elected who's called Abigail Spanberger. She was a former senator and now she's the governor of that state, right? Pretty much the state is liberal at this point. The Democrats have the House there, and the Senate there. They control all parties of government there. That's what we call like a trifecta. That's what we call a blue state. A purple state is when it's divided, right? And divided in the sense of like you could have in the state of Michigan, for example, the House is controlled by Republicans, the Senate is controlled by Democrats, but then our governorship and the executive branch around it is progressive Democrats, right? So they're not progressive Democrats, but Democrats, right? So that's what we call a purple state. A red state is when the trifecta is overall. So states like Florida, where the House, Republican, the Senate, Republican, the governorship, Republican. And then you take that on the federal level. So the federal level looks exactly the same right now. It's a red domain. We are in a midterm. Midterms are in November. If Donald Trump keeps doing what Donald Trump is doing, the Democrats will take the House and the Senate, making it harder for Donald Trump to do every sort of shit, right? They're going to charge this man. They're going to have control and things like that. But now the issue is like, we're dealing with the Epstein files, we're dealing with this, we're dealing with that. And like the one thing Donald Trump's new regime has really done a successful job is overwhelming people with media nonsense, right?
Yep.
And I saw a TikTok and someone's like, how do you not feel overwhelmed? And I'm like, I feel overwhelmed, but like, what can I do about it, right? And like the response I tell to people is go vote. Don't have an excuse of like, I'm not voting because my vote doesn't matter. It actually does, okay? There was this big rhetoric during Trump's election. It's like, oh, your vote doesn't matter. It doesn't count. It actually does. It counts a lot. And people don't understand how much votes really do matter, right? Like a small district, let me give you an example. The city of Dearborn, it's like one of the largest Arab populations in Michigan, which is part of the Metro Detroit cities. And then there's Dearborn Heights. It's like a little circle kind of around it and it's expanding out, right? If 1,000 more people voted for, well, we know the numbers now, but if like 10,000 more people voted for Kamala Harris than they did Donald Trump, he would have like won Dearborn Heights, right? He did win Detroit. Detroit City did go to the Democrats because it's majority Black people and it's very Democratic and progressive. And the one thing that also happened is we're currently living in a state where people are willing to vote for Democrats in different cases, right? We have in the, I'm in the outskirts. I live like 30 minutes away from Detroit, but we have a Democratic mayor. Her name is Mary Sheffield. She's the first woman and first Black woman to hold office in Detroit, right? So we have Mary Sheffield. We have a bunch of progressives, right? And if you're looking at voting correctly, you're like, okay, well, if Mary Sheffield and all these people under her are Democrats, why didn't Kamala Harris win? Because people are selectively choosing. We have something called down ballot. It's where you go, I'm just going to vote straight ticket down ballot. Like, I'm just going to vote Democrat. In this election, they did it. Some people went Donald Trump, everyone else Democrat. Or some people went no one, everyone Democrat, right? Like it was kind of that case that caused this like imbalance. So now we're like dealing with the aftermath and it brings us to the midterms of with the Jasmine Crockett, James Talarico thing, there's a big divide in how people are like, this is a very qualified Black woman again against James Talarico, who does have some experience, but not enough as Jasmine Crockett. From like what I've seen and what I know, Jasmine Crockett outnumbers this man. She's like actually a sitting House member. Like her experience is more than the man running against her.
Yeah.
And the amount of people coming out like, she took APAC money, she did this, which you have valid concerns. But if your valid concerns are then saying this and you're voting James Talarico, like there is also a hidden racism also going on. There's a senator, you can look him up. His name is John Fetterman, right? I remember this because I ride or died for John Fetterman. I didn't even live in his state. He lives 2 states away from me. People ride and died for this man. He was like this tall giant. He was very gentle. He was very great. Everyone loved him. We thought he was going to be like a big thing in Pennsylvania. He was awesome. Fetterman is raising motherfucking hell. Barely showing up, voting for Republican talking points, making Republican talks. He was one of the reasons when we had that government shutdown for 40 days, if we kept holding out, we would have had Republicans. We had Republicans by their neck. He was one of the people who rallied people to vote with the Republicans to end the government shutdown because you needed Democrats to end the government shutdown. It was the Republicans' fault, but you needed Democrats. So basically what was happening was Fetterman was Fettermaning, is what I'm calling it. And it basically caused I think he took 10, I think it was like 10 or 11 people to vote Republican in that way. So that's what I'm saying there. So that's the effect of what's happening now. Donald Trump is not going to have this ever-loving chokehold. This is not going to be a Donald Trump dynasty. It's really not. And I want people to understand, it is hard to be a Clinton dynasty, a Kennedy dynasty right now. It's not going to happen. No one likes his kids. No one likes his kids. No one really likes his kids. So, you're not going to sit there and be like, Donald Trump Jr. is going to be a great... No, this is not what's going to happen. And then there's a whole conversation where he's like, I should run for a third time. And I was like, okay, do that. And then if you're going to change the law, everyone is going to get Obama on your ass. We will bring back the man that you talk shit about and care because people still love Obama. There is still Republicans who love Obama down. So don't act like Obama was the worst thing to happen in America. He's actually one of the best things to happen in America from certain points of views that I saw. Again, I didn't vote during Obama's time because I did not have the right to vote. I didn't live here for the first part. The second part, I was still a teenager, but other than that. So that's a little bit of an insight. I know that's long discussion, but I'm going to pivot a little bit.
It's good.
To that, but go ahead. I'm going to, 1 second, pause. I'm going to turn on the light because I told you it's 6 p.m. here.
Yeah.
That's so much better. Okay, now we have light.
Wow, beautiful. I can see you better.
Okay, awesome.
On that point, though, just quickly, that's why I think it's so. In Australia, we have compulsory voting. I don't know if you knew that. And
you do, and it's the one thing voting is a right. It's given if you're a law-abiding American, but people also just choose not to vote. People don't people choose not to vote, and we can't make it a law. You have to make it a constitutional amendment, which is a whole thing to basically say, because if you don't vote, you can I guess your license gets taken away or some other things.
What in Australia?
Australia.
No, you get a fine of $100.
Just go vote.
So well, that's the thing. But the thing is, people just do it because it's I don't know, it's like brushing your teeth. You just, as a habit, you go, voting day, and it happens at the schools on a Saturday, and there's a sausage sizzle. And actually, our polls are open for a week in person before.
Okay.
So we make it really easy to vote. So everyone just goes, don't want $100 fine. I can get a sausage because there's always some charity out the front doing a sausage sizzle, and it's really easy. But I think that's why we kept our more left-wing party in power, because as you're saying, every vote really does count. And I think most Americans, if it came down to it, if it was a compulsory voting, they wouldn't be voting for Trump. I just don't think in my heart that most, or do you think differently?
Well,
maybe I'm too optimistic.
Weirdly enough, Republicans are now making it harder for people to vote, right? Donald Trump has spread this conspiracy illegal aliens are voting, which we're now seeing facts that more Republicans are lying. There was a guy who apparently voted for his dead mother. It's a federal crime to lie. So this man is in jail. I think it was in Florida or something. So there's more proof that Republicans are doing voter fraud than Democrats are. And so they're trying to make it hard for more progressives to vote. A good example is what's called the SAVE Act. It's something that's new. It's basically a policy that you have to have a form of voter ID to go and vote. Funny enough, you technically do. When you turn 18 and you get your license or whatever, you automatically, in some states, automatically get registered to vote. In my state, automatic. 18th birthday, your system, you get pushed in, right? But now he wants to make it harder. It's like you have to show a form of identification when you get to the polls. You kind of do anyway. Like they ask for my license when I get there and they scan it just to like get my ballot or whatever. And they also do that when you do absentee voting. But it's going to make it harder for women, right? Because your birth certificate name has to match your records, right? So a lot of married women are either going to have to change their last name back to their original name or get proof that it's a name change, which if you're going to a Republican state and they're just like, well, your names don't match, we don't care, blah, 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 it's going to make it more harder for women to vote. But at the same time, you have to have like, I think a birth certificate or a passport, which is really not that hard to get. It just takes a while. But then if Republicans are in control of the passport services, are they going to limit people getting passports so they can't vote? Is it going to be harder to get a passport around election time so you can vote? So the SAVE Act is like a really messy way of them saying like, oh, we don't want you to vote. And they're trying to make it hard to vote. They're pushing this narrative of like, everyone has to vote in person. I was like, if you live in the city of Atlanta, some people literally get in line at 7 o'clock and they don't end up voting till 2 in the afternoon.
What?
Right? Like voting queues are long. Like machines get broken. People are waiting. I know people in the city of Atlanta who talk about like they waited in a 45-minute line, 2-hour line, 3-hour line in certain places to go and vote. It is really hard to vote when you don't have, you know, your governor on your side to go and vote, right? Like the governor of Georgia really made it really hard for people to vote. And then there was excuse of like, they try to throw out ballots of people who were like alive. There was there was news about this person who apparently like his vote got thrown out because they were like, he's dead. And I was like, I'm still alive. Like, and the funny thing is, it's like, this man is a Democrat. So they were like, they were throwing out votes, like hundreds of votes and saying like, oh, these people are dead or incarcerated. And they're like, I'm here. I don't have a right. And so proving, also there's things that happen where if a voting organization says that, oh, you know, you're dead, they can legally declare you dead. And it's so hard to like come back to life in a legal manner when they go, well, you're dead for voting. And so that happened to someone. I remember that story. It was this person ended up going to go and vote. They said he was legally dead. What the heck happened? So it was a couple of weeks before the voting. And so to get unlegally dead, you have to like go through a whole process and go through a court system, which takes months. And then because it's flagged in the system, credit cards get shut down. This gets shut down. It made a guy's life like a living hell. I'll try to find the story and send it to you later. Please. But they're making it super, super hard to vote. And I feel like people don't understand that. But I want to bring in our next topic, which will kind of tie a little bit in, is how do you think algorithms reward outrage in your experience? Like, how do you feel algorithms push extreme rhetoric further than nuanced conversations from an Australian viewpoint? Because I think from America, outrage makes you bank. And it still does. So
it does. And I think that, you know, there's actually a campaign going on right now from a woman called Chanel Contos. And her entire career started when she was, I think she was 18 or 19, and she essentially did this huge campaign called Teach Us Consent, where she was speaking about the sexual assaults in high schools and in universities and how frequent it was. Essentially like a Me Too movement but it was also about rape culture. And so she started this charity. She's now gone on, and I think she's got a degree from Oxford. I've interviewed her multiple times. She's so wonderful. And she's got a new campaign that's called Fix Your Feed, where she's trying to petition to the Australian government to allow us to opt out of algorithmic feeds. Yeah, and it's happened in Europe, in the EU somewhere. I can't remember which country exactly, but it's been trialed and it can work because you have to opt in. It's about affirmative consent. So you have to choose to have algorithmic rather than chronological. And this has happened in other countries where Instagram has done. I don't think TikTok has, obviously, that's a whole thing. But where algorithms currently are in Australia trying to be petitioned to be changed. There's this huge movement going on because of that outrage and how that outrage fuels culture wars. But also, as you say, it makes you bank. It makes you so much fucking money. And even in my work and in what I do, which, you know, I do multiple podcasts a week, I do TikTok, I do Instagram, whatever. I try and do silly outfit content, then I try and do political content, whatever the hell I'm thinking about, you know. And even I've noticed in the way that I create content, sometimes I want to have a nuanced discussion. And
Yeah.
on social media, I go, there's actually no point me posting this because it's nuanced or because it's going to take me a while to explain the context behind it or something, where there's no point me uploading this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it on the podcast, and that can be a whole episode on the podcast, and then it's out there, but then it never really reaches the algorithm. And then if I do a video from the podcast, it's a section that then is lacking nuance, and then that causes more chaos. So even in the way that I create content, I've noticed myself doing it. Hopefully not too maliciously or, badly, but that's just the reality when you have algorithms that fuel outrage and that also are creating millionaires out of the outrage and out of saying something more and more and more controversial and reaction content. I feel like we are just going down the path of brainwashing particularly young people, who I believe a lot of young people online is more real than the real world to them.
So then I have a question to you to just like chime in there.
No,
so
go.
you're saying that, have you experienced like backlash and targeted attacks for your views? Because I've seen it in your comment sections and how like certain people respond.
The media, the mainstream media are after me, particularly after the election last year. Really crazy. So yeah, I've gotten backlash. There have been these protests recently that are called a March for Australia in quotation marks, and they're actually just, in my opinion, they're white nationalist marches, anti-immigration. They also have been linked to neo-Nazi organisations in Australia. So essentially, they are affiliated with neo-Nazis have been speaking at these rallies, and people at these rallies, I don't know if these people are Nazis, but they're at least walking alongside them with people that have signs saying, free this Nazi he's in jail right now because he made a rape threat towards my local member that I voted for in the election. He said that she should be raped, or there was some sort of threat or rape. He's in prison right now, and there are people at these March for Australia rallies that have these signs that say free him, right? So these rallies are happening, and people at these rallies have "fuck you, Abbie Chatfield" signs. They have T-shirts with my face on it, crying. So it's not, my partner has been threatened with violence in the streets.
Also, just want to chime in a little bit. When y'all get married, I would like to be at that wedding. The way that man looks at you, he literally wants to eat you up every time. He's like, this is my girl. I will ride or die for this woman. I don't care. I was like, is this what love looks like? Am I intruding?
Babe, it's crazy. Babe, the first few months we were together, I thought that I was in a coma. I thought that it was going to be one of those things where I wake up and I go, it was all a dream, because it was so good. But yeah, like I get backlash. I mean, and I think calling it backlash is even like weird because it implies that like I've done something wrong. Like it's like when someone gets cancelled, it's like she's gotten backlash for inappropriate comments. It's like, I don't know, guys, saying that I hate Nazis maybe shouldn't be controversial. But yeah, so I get a lot of death threats with my address. My address has been leaked by certain groups. The media also twist things. So I'm kind of like this weird figurehead for some reason in Australia of like they did an article a year ago that said, is this when Australia reached peak woke? And they used a photo of me in a joking video. I'm like doing this and going like screaming with my face because I was joking in a video, and that was the photo they choose to use. So I'm this weird like figurehead of this thing. So whenever, like when the Bondi terrorist attacks happened, I was getting DMs saying that it was my fault and that I have blood on my hands. That's in my community when a friend of ours had 2 friends murdered in that terrorist attack. So yeah, it's pretty fucking crazy, and it's fueled by the media because the media also are doing they're now copying kind of Fox News. So they're also learning from that playbook, and I've really noticed it in the past year or so. Ever since Trump's gotten in, I've noticed the media, even the angles they're taking to then fuel this. It's really crazy.
And I want to start with one thing, and I think it's very important. You didn't cause this. Horrible people in the world did. And so for people to use you as a scapegoat is rooted in misogyny. It's rooted in small penis energy. It's rooted in jealousy. And I want to stand by that because every time you speak, you are speaking on issues that matter, right? And I want you to keep speaking, like use your voice and use your power, because if you're not saying what's going on in Australia, no one would know. Like, no one would like care, right? And then people are like, oh, well, it doesn't really matter. It's Australia. No, when a virus spreads, a virus goes everywhere and it's spreading to countries that never experienced the virus before, right?
Mm.
It had issues, and I stand with the statement for all those people who are like, oh, Australia first. No one is illegal on stolen land, and the people who actually own the land are the Aboriginals to Australia. And so all those people saying like, I'm really like on Australian, I've been here all this time. I was like, no, you were shipped here, and Australia was actually used as a prison for a bit.
Yeah.
So I know that history. Do you know yours? So never feel like you should stop. Never, no one should ever make you feel like what you're saying isn't valued or important. It is very important because your perspective has reached people like me. It will reach people globally. It definitely has. Like, people in America, I see in your comment section, they're like, we're not okay here. We're not for our lives. But we appreciate you sharing your perspective and how it's affecting your country, because the more people speak, the more history will record these conversations and know there were people actually there fighting.
Thank you so much. That's so lovely. Yeah, you're so right about this virus spreading, and we really, I mean, like you said, Australia has had a really dark history. Maybe we can do an episode where I tell you a bit about that, or you should get someone on to
Okay,
talk about
part two,
that.
y'all. Part two.
Yeah.
We're doing a part two. It's happening.
I mean, look, I may not be the perfect person to speak about it because our history is really dark when it comes to the treatment of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. But even just as you were speaking, about us being on stolen land. The irony of these March for Australia rallies is that the reason why they hate me is because I made a video saying that they're all scum for going to this rally, because at the end of this rally, one of the rallies in Melbourne, the neo-Nazis actually stormed an Aboriginal peaceful protest camp, Camp Sovereignty, and they bashed Aboriginal women. So if you really are caring about, if your issue is immigrants, then shouldn't the Aboriginal people be your first priority? Shouldn't they be the ones that you are supporting and protecting? But it's very clear that that isn't the motivation. It is pure racism. It is so sickening to see this being emboldened, and it's been validated by Trump being elected. And I said this when it happened, and everyone told me I was crazy. And now I didn't want to be right. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to be isolated from it. But the way that it's infiltrated our culture and our politics and has changed, I really worry that we're going down, sorry to say this, but the America route. Like, a lot of people, a lot of my, a lot of older people, a lot of boomers here that are normal. My partner's dad is a physics professor, so he's an academic, and his wife is a gender studies lecturer. So we talk about this a little, quite a bit, and my mum's a teacher, my family are all doctors and dentists, and so they've always been kind of left leaning, right?
Yeah.
And everyone that's my parents' friends are all like, Australia didn't used to be like this. We're turning into bloody fucking America. Turning into America. And sorry to say that to the Americans that are listening to this, but it's a real fear, because there are so many amazing things about America. But like, my mum actually lived in Baltimore when she was 8 years old for a year. So random. So mum's like, I love so many things about America, but the way that we're seeing into the future with where you guys are. And for some reason, we are following suit in many ways, and it's really disturbing.
But I want to end on like a hopeful note. And from your perspective, like, what gives you hope in this media environment during all this hoopla nonsense that keeps you going, right? Like, what gives you hope to keep going? Because for me, I think I keep doing what I'm doing because there's a chance that I could change someone's mind. There's a chance that people see a Black woman voice like in this space, because I honestly started this podcast because there's not a lot of Black women podcasters. There's not.
They really aren't.
Like, in the political space, like we have all these great conversations. I'm like, people talk, please have discussions. And then it's hard for, people to pick this up and be like, oh, this is something worth valuing, because there's a whole male loneliness epidemic. I just said that in a whole conversation I had earlier today, where people were like, well, we need to prioritize white males. And I was like, Black people have been the backbone of America. They have been the people who vote for the Democratic Party, amplify our voices more than ever right now, so they don't lose hope. And as an immigrant myself, an immigrant Nigerian, I'm like, what I do gives hope to other Nigerians. I was just talking to my brother. He's currently living his life. And he was like, they love you over here. They love the content you're making, political or not political. You're shining a light in a way Nigerians want to be seen. And I talk to other people at the same time, and that gives me hope. It gives me hope that who I'm talking to, who I'm reaching, are inspiring people to keep going, keep continuing. But I would love to hear from you to wrap our conversation up.
Oh, yeah, well, you should be so proud of yourself, and you should maintain that hope and optimism, because what you're saying, as you said, I could mirror back exactly what you said to me before. You know, what you're saying is so important, and it is so important to have Black women speak in this space, because so often your voices are marginalized and pushed to the side, you know, and
Yeah.
it's the same in Australia. And I think the thing that's giving me hope is seeing more, we've seen more and more independent media companies in Australia pop up that do amplify these voices of Black women or Aboriginal people
Yeah.
or Arab women, or, you know, men that are talking about how bad the red pill pipeline is. You know, we're seeing that more and more. And I think the benefit of Australia's small population, the negative is that things can spread quickly, and that it can, you know, before you know it, everyone is thinking the exact same thing. And
Yeah.
it's, you know, it's very easy to spread things. But the benefits of that is that we have these independent media companies that are coming up, such as a friend of mine owns one called Cheek Media, and she's only 27, and she is running for Senate in a couple of years. And her media company has got, you know, over 200,000 followers, and she started that a few years ago out of uni, and that is becoming one of the loudest media voices
Yeah.
in Australia, because of the power of people actually caring. And I think that seeing that growth and seeing people have access to be able to be in media without having to be chosen by a media network that is often influenced by the government and by lobbyists, I think that is giving me a lot of hope. And seeing even like Midas Touch podcast, I know what you think about them, but, you know, a whole podcast about how awful Trump
I
is.
like them. You should also check out Coroner News. I'm actually having the founder on, Tara, Friday.
Amazing. That's
So we're going to
amazing.
discuss about what it's like to be a female CEO and running an independent media organization while you have an administration saying like, "Oh, news is fake," all of this X, Y, and Z. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love Midas Touch. I love Coroner News. There's a lot of independent media outlets, and they're growing. They're growing.
Yeah.
They're growing. So
And I
yeah.
think it's also because of the backlash. My second part to my answer, sorry to keep going, but the last thing is that it's what you said before, the opposite, you know, about the Democrats, even like Zoran Mamdani, like him
Mhm.
winning. I think the pendulum swing back, even though the pendulum swung towards Republicans after
Mhm.
Obama. I do think that there are more people going, as it gets more and more extreme, there are more people going, this is too much now. This is too
Yeah.
much now. And even though it doesn't feel like it's everyone agreeing at one point, like I'm sure you also thought that the Epstein files would maybe change people's opinions completely.
It doesn't.
It
They don't
didn't.
care.
They don't give a fuck. They don't give a
No,
fuck.
they don't care. A lot of people care, but a lot of people don't care, which is
Mm.
very discerning, right? It's weird because Trump is going like, "I'm vindicated." You know, I am not. I'm like, child, your name is in there so
He's just
much.
lying. He's just lying. But I think more and more people are just seeing that, and I do have optimism in regards to that. And I think that while this more extreme content is really bad, I think that these figureheads that are speaking about these things, they're running out of space where it's still
Mm.
reasonable. So I'm kind of hoping that in this intense division, we will get to a point where we are so far away that we have to like rubber band and snap back together,
Yeah.
because people are going to realize that actually what's going on is not just politics. It is not just rhetoric. It isn't just, you know, speeches from the president. It is all informing culture, and our culture can't survive this if we keep going down this route.
Agree. So I want to say thank you to Abby for being on the podcast. She will be back. This is not a
Yeah.
conversation that's going to stop. I think I would love to have more people from across the world sharing their perspective on how this administration, how America is really affecting them. Actually, I'm hoping to talk to someone who is Iranian and is going to tell me what's going on, because people want me to talk about it. I want to talk about it, but
Mm.
sometimes I need to let my platform be the platform that other people speak on. And I'm
Mm.
glad to have this opportunity to do it with Abby. So thank you, everyone. Make sure you like and subscribe. Also, follow Abby on all social media. Check out her podcast. All of that will be linked below. Thank you so much, Abbie. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's so good to talk to you.
That was my conversation with Abbie Chatfield. One thing that stood out was how interconnected our political environments have become. The internet doesn't just respect borders, and it neither does rhetoric. What starts as a talking point in one country can really quickly become a cultural flashpoint where everyone can see it. But this conversation is about the courage, about choosing to speak up in a climate where public commentary can invite intense backlash. It's a reminder that media literacy matters, nuance matters, and how we engage online matters. If this episode made your day, it resonated with you, and you're thinking differently about global impacts of political discourse, share it. Start a conversation. Reflect on the kind of media you're consuming and amplifying. As always, thank you for continuing the conversation with me. I'll see you next time. Bye, friends.